when we have refuted the coarse impossible me and the subtle impossible me, then we're still left with something further that we have to refute, according to the Prasangika system as asserted in the Gelugpa tradition. First of all, we should note that according to Prasangika, this grasping for a self-sufficiently knowable me, which all the other schools say is just automatically arising. Gelugpa says, Gelugpa Prasangika says, I'll just say Prasangika from now on, I don't have to specify again that it's the Gelugpa variant of Prasangika. They say that not only is there an automatically arising variant of this, but there's also a doctrinally based one. And the doctrinally based one is what you might have been taught from the Vaibhashika system of tenets within Buddhism. According to the Vaibhashikas, and I won't go into a detailed description of the Vaibhashika system, but according to them, the self can be self-sufficiently known. So if that has to do with the way that perception works according to the Vaibhashika system. And they don't assert that cognition works through mental holograms. And so you have a quite completely different explanation of how cognition and perception works. So within those theories, a self can appear by itself. So Prasangika says that that automatically arising grasping for self-sufficiently knowable me could also be doctrinally based. Okay? Now, moving that aside, if we have refuted that, what are we left with? We're left with a self that is imputed on the aggregates, changing from moment to moment, has parts, and can only be known with the basis, simultaneously with its basis of imputation. That's called imputably knowable. Okay. Now, what we are left with is a self that is truly and findably existent, self-established, established by findable characteristic marks within the basis of imputation. How's that for a lot of jargon? That I can only know you with, let's say, your body appearing. I can only see you with the appearance of your body. And I know that you are imputed on the body, the appearance of the body, and changing from moment to moment, etc. But what it seems like is that there is some findable characteristic on the side of the body, like a barcode or genome or something like that, which by its own power makes you you as an individual, as opposed to being the person next to you. That could either be automatically arising or doctrinally based. You could be taught that from the Sautrantika, Chittamatra, or Svatantrika tenet systems. This is the fallacy that you have to refute, that there's something findable on the side of the basis that either by its own power or in connection with mental labeling has the power to establish and make you, you. This is very subtle, to try to recognize and identify. And so that type of me that is established by a findable characteristic mark, a barcode, to put it simply, doesn't exist. That's an impossible way of establishing. Now you have to understand the terminology a little bit more precisely. We're talking about what establishes, that's the same word as proves, doesn't create it. But what proves? How do you know that there's a person there? And Prasangika says that it is only what the word, me refers to on the basis of that basis of imputation. But there's nothing findable on the basis by its own power that establishes it by itself or in conjunction with mental labeling. Okay? And this is true not only of persons, but of everything, Prasangika says. Yeah.
I'm just thinking then, who's right? If she said she's red and you see her as blue, who's right of you two?
If she says it's right, if she says it's red or she says it's blue, so how do we establish? You see, this brings up the whole topic of valid cognition. How do you know that something is accurate? The other schools, the non-Prasangika, now we're leaving Vaibhashika aside, the other schools, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, Svatantrika, would say, well, they're slightly different, so let's put that aside as well. Let us just speak in terms of how Prasangika refutes Svatantrika. They say that there has to be something on the side of a king, a person, there's the king, the royal caste, that makes them a king. Otherwise, if it was just mentally labeled, you could label the beggar king. This is the India, caste system and so on. So that's an important issue. So there has to be something on the side of the body, the person, or whatever, that together with the label king makes them king. Otherwise, anybody could be labeled anything. And so this is, which sounds pretty reasonable. However, that is false, according to Prasangika. Prasangika says, how do you establish this? Coming from Chandrakirti, a great Indian master, that says that what establishes that a valid cognition, a valid labeling of something? First of all, there has to be, it is established not from the side of the object, it's established from the side of the mind. Any mind, general. So there has to be a general convention that is agreed upon by a certain group. So a certain group of people will label that red. And there is such a convention as red. If you talk about the convention of orange, well, there is no convention of orange in Chinese. There's red, there's yellow, there's no orange. They divide the color spectrum differently. There's no convention. So there has to be a group that agrees on the convention. Colorblind people wouldn't have the convention of red or blue. So it has to be a convention accepted by a certain group. Then it has to be not contradicted by a mind that validly cognizes conventional truth of something. So if I take my glasses off and I see a blur in front of me, well, there isn't a blur sitting in front of me. This isn't a blur. So others who have, not faulty eyes, or if I put on my glasses, will contradict that. So it has to be not contradicted by minds that validly see conventional truth, what this is. And then it has to be not contradicted by a mind that validly sees or perceives deepest truth, voidness. Appears as though, this is truly existent, established for its own side, and so on, but a mind that sees reality sees that this is false. It has to be not contradicted by a mind that sees deepest truth. So by those three criteria, which are from the side of the mind, not from the side of the object, then it is valid. Now, there are defining characteristics on the side of an object. But those defining characteristics are also mentally imputed and don't have the power by themselves or with mental labeling to establish something as what it is. The example that I love to use for that is you have 12 eggs. They are divisible. The 12 eggs are divisible by 3 into 3 groups of 4. They're divisible by 4 into 4 groups of 3, divisible by 6 to 6 groups of 2, divisible by 2 into 2 groups of 6, and so on. That defining characteristic of divisibility by 3, or divisibility by 2, or divisibility by 6, where is it? You can't find it in those 12 eggs. It's mentally labeled onto the 12 eggs. Are they divisible by 3 and by 4 and by 6? Yes. What establishes that they are divisible by 3 or 4 or by 6? A mental label. The concept of numbers and divisibility. And different groups, those who like 3-egg omelets and those who like 2-egg omelets, will perceive it differently. And they're both correct. That's how you solve the dilemma of the hungry ghost seeing something as pus, humans as water, gods as nectar. That's the solution to that dilemma. They're all valid. And what is the water from its own side? It's not any of these things. It's not even water. You can't say it's water seen as pus.
What is the basis of the water then?
What is the basis of the water? Molecules. What is the basis of the molecules? Atoms. What's the basis of the atoms? Quarks and, it goes on and on and on and on. There's nothing findable. Everything is based on parts. When you step back, is there, something there? Yes. But even knowable object is mentally labeled. There's nothing around it, a big line that, or plastic that separates it from the molecules on the other side of the plastic wall that makes it into a knowable item. There's nothing on the side of it that makes it like that. That also is mentally labeled. Ooh. Yes.
I was just thinking about karma.
About what?
Karma.
Karma or a comet?
Karma.
Karma is the
Karma.
R, yeah.
What about karma?
Don't we have, isn't there some karma?
There is some karma karma, the tendencies from, a certain type of karmic behavior. One of the things that it will ripen into is into a specific rebirth state. And so within that rebirth state, of course, there will be certain things that come as part of that package. You're reborn a dog. When you're happy, you wag your tail. When you're reborn as a human, that's not the way that you express your happiness. You know, there are, each one has its own characteristics. You know, what one species regards as edible, another species will not regard as edible. One will label this as edible, another one won't. So that's part of the package of a rebirth state. And then there will be your individual preferences for vanilla or chocolate.
Yeah, but I was thinking about, for example, if you in many lifetimes haven't told a lie, then you would have the benefits of many people will listen to you and trust in what you say.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, is that something that people put labels you with, or is it something that you have with you as in this, as you say?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. She says, if we have refrained from lying in many lifetimes, mind you, we have beginningless rebirths, so also many lifetimes we've lied. But in any case, if we have activated those tendencies, if they have been stronger in our previous lifetime, so that in this lifetime they ripen into somebody who speaks the truth, and now there has to be other people who will, believe us. There are some who will be reborn because of their tendencies. No matter what we say, they don't believe us. So you have to have corresponding side of people who will believe what you say is true. I mean, you have the four possibilities, and you can say complete nonsense, and there'll be other people who will believe you. So you need to have all of, don't you? I mean, you can say nonsense, some will believe you, some won't. You can say the truth, some will believe you, some won't. So four possibilities. Then, so she's saying, well, is that labeled? Well, yes, because all you're doing is making, sound.
But what about the,
And it is labeled truth or not truth by a convention.
But my example was His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and I think that many people listen to him and think that he tells the truth.
Right.
And is that something we label on him?
Yes.
Okay.
There's the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and many people listen to him, and many people think that he tells the truth. There's also Adolf Hitler. Many people listened to him, and many people thought he told the truth. What is truth?
Yeah.
The label, isn't it? So having many people listen to you and believe what you say is one thing. Whether or not what you say is true or not depends on many situations, doesn't it? I mean, it's clear with the Dalai Lama and Hitler. But if somebody speaks in terms of what the, physics, what is the weight of a person on the Earth and what's the weight on the moon, if they just say, what they weigh and they don't specify whether it's on the Earth or on the moon, well, certain things are relative. Nothing is established independently of mental labeling alone, from the Prasangika point of view. That's the only way to establish something. Because if you try to find something on the side of the object that by its own power or together with mental labeling can establish something as what it is, can never find it. So you have the mental label. This is the distinction that I was referring to before. Mental label refers to something. There is a me. So it refers to something, but there's nothing that corresponds to it that's in the background holding it up. What corresponds to it is something findable as a me, in that box of me, or that box of red. We use that example of a color. Does the label red refer to something? Sure, it refers to something. It doesn't refer to nothing. It refers to something. But on the side of the spectrum, is there, a little label that says from this, part of the spectrum to that part of the spectrum with big walls on both sides, that's red. And in there's this barcode that says red. And, you see that and it lights up and now you've seen red. Not like that. So there's nothing that corresponds to the label on the side of the object. But in the basis. But the label refers to something conventionally. That's what convention means. There is that convention. Think about that. And the way that you start to think about this, don't just, leave it in an abstract type of thing, then you get lost and you have no idea what to think about. Is there something in me that makes me me? What makes me me? What makes this chair mine? There's nothing mine on the side of the chair. There's nothing me on the side of the body that's sitting on it. Nothing that makes me me, or makes this chair mine, except labeling. Yeah.
But couldn't we very well say that this particular conglomerate of aggregates and physical basis that's sitting on that chair is differentiable from other such
Yes,
conglomerates?
everything has individuality. We're not refuting individuality.
Yeah. So if
But-
we accept that we exist as changing blobs of stuff, then really is that thought so different from the thought that there is a changing me?
Well, this is, what is the difference then? Why do we have to refute this more subtle level? I think is what your question is coming to, because there can still be what are known as subtle disturbing emotions that are still left, even if you refuted the grosser ones. So I know, I'm not, terms of persons, this comes in the bodhicitta meditations. You have two types of equanimity, which are that you need to develop. One is the basis for developing the emotional type of love and compassion. And the other is the basis for developing rational love and compassion. So the emotional love, and you have to have both. It can't just be, oh, I love everybody and I want everybody to be happy. And it can't just be, tick off each person. This one is happy, this one isn't happy, and so on. So you have to have a combination. So the first type of equanimity is the equanimity which is dealing with grosser emotions of I'm attracted to this one, I'm repelled from that one, I don't like that one, I like this one, and this one is a stranger. Who cares about them? So you have to develop equanimity. Everybody has been friend, enemy, and stranger at different times over beginningless lifetimes, so there's no difference. Then on the basis of that, an emotional level, if everybody has been everything to us, then friend, enemy, and stranger, then they've also been a mother to us, and they've also been kind to us, and then you feel gratitude, and how grateful I am, and I'd like to do something to help you, and your heart warms when you see them, and you wouldn't like anything terrible to happen, and then love, may they be happy, and have the causes for happiness, compassion, may they be free of suffering, and the causes of suffering. So it's an emotional development of love and compassion. Then you supplement it with the practice of equalizing and exchanging self with others. And that's a rational process. So now you're dealing with a more subtle one, disturbing emotions. So it's not that I'm attracted, to you or repelled from you on the basis of, thinking that you are self-sufficiently knowable, you, I just want you, I want to be loved by you and nobody else by you. There's a song like that. Right? It doesn't matter that, other people, I want to be loved by you. So as if you could be known especially. So that's emotional. Now, take that away, and what are we left with? We are left with that there is something on the side of me and something on the side of you that establishes us as two individuals. Findable. On the basis of that, you would have this disturbing, subtle disturbing emotion of considering some as being close to me and some as being distant from me. Because based on karma and past lives and our interaction, there's a truly established me over here and a truly established you over there, and we're close. And then there's another truly established person in Zimbabwe or something like that that I haven't met, and that's distant. And so then you have to, so that's a disturbing emotion, but it's very subtle. And it's not, oh, I want to be loved by you. And that then, has to be overcome by equalizing, and you equalize it on a rational basis, that everybody wants to be happy, nobody wants to be unhappy. And that just as you can care from the point of view of me, I can also care, and cherish from the point of view of you. Because there's nothing findable on the side of me or nothing findable on the side of you that restricts me to only taking care of me. So it's a very rational development. And then, you see the disadvantages of self-cherishing, the advantages of cherishing others. You change your point of view, develop love and compassion. So it's the rational development of love and compassion, and the two supplement each other. Then you go on from that by taking, with love and compassion, you just decide that I'm going to help everybody. It's the intention. No, I'm sorry, it's just the intention. It's not the decision, it's just the intention. I intend to help you. Intend to, try to bring about happiness. Then the exceptional resolve, I'm really going to do it. Then you see, it's only if you become a Buddha that you can actually do it. So then you develop bodhicitta, which is your mind is aimed at your own individual enlightenment, not at Buddha Shakyamuni's enlightenment, not at the enlightenment up in the sky in general, but at your own individual enlightenment, which is not yet happening, but which can happen on the basis of your Buddha nature factors. So it's imputed, the not yet happening result on the basis of its cause, when all the conditions are gathered. So it works like that. So you can see identifying these subtle, disturbing emotions is very important. And it does create a problem. It does create suffering. If you consider some as close and others as far, even if you're beyond, I want to be loved by you. Yeah.
I'm mixing the tenets, I think, in terms of Buddha nature, from the Prasangika point of view. How do you establish that?
Buddha nature factors are speaking about the two networks, positive force and deep awareness, the so-called collection of merit and collection of wisdom. Well, I find those terrible terms. Collection of merit is, in my little book over here, I have all the points and the stamps. I get enough and I win. So it's not that. But it's, this positive force that we have been building up can then bring about a phase transition. I like that image of a phase transition. You get that from physics. So if you have ice and you put in enough energy, then there will be a phase transition and it will transform into water. And you put in more energy and another phase transition and it will turn into steam. So likewise, in terms of our understanding, so you have to supplement it with a network of more and more understanding. Then our confused understanding, an Arya level of understanding, a Buddha level of Arhat level of understanding, a Buddha level of understanding. So, it works like that. So these are the evolving Buddha nature factors. You have the abiding Buddha nature factors, which are from Gelugpa point of view, just the voidness of the mind, which means that it is not static and fixed as something solid, but it can be transformed into, get rid of its limitations and so on. Other schools will put in the conventional nature of the mind. You can put in the 5 types of deep awareness. You can put in, a number of things in terms of abiding factors. And then the third type of Buddha nature factor is the fact that all of this can be, the mental continuum and these factors can be stimulated to grow through inspiration, which is how I like to translate this word, which is so terribly translated as blessing. The blessing of the gurus. Come on, that's from another tradition. There's no blessing. It's inspiration. It can be uplifted, inspired to develop. So these are Buddha nature. So on the basis of that, you can impute that when all the causes and conditions are complete, not yet happening, there will no longer be a not yet happening enlightenment. There will be a presently happening enlightenment. So that's what you are aiming at with bodhicitta, with a full understanding that it's possible and how it's possible. Otherwise, it's just wishful thinking.
And the motivation?
The motivation is to be able to benefit all others. Love and compassion and the exceptional resolve. I'm going to do something, not just, I wish they were, happy.
Even though it's just merely imputed on the basis.
What is merely imputed? Everything is merely imputed.
Yeah. So we don't. It doesn't.
Well, what is compassion? Each moment I'm feeling something different. So you label compassion on it. What I feel and what you feel Not exactly the same. But we can label it with the category compassion. And are there defining characteristics of it? Yes. But people made up that defining characteristic because within the emotions, there are no boxes on the side of emotions that says this emotion is love and that emotion is compassion. There's nothing on the side of emotions. Somebody made up a dictionary and made up definitions, and there you go. So even defining characteristics are mentally labeled. Are there defining characteristics? Yes. Is there such a thing as love and compassion? Yes. It's established by the fact that, cavemen got together and decided, to, that's pretty weird if you think about it. How did it evolve? That, cave people, you could imagine, coming up with words for rock and things like that. But how in the world did they come up with words for emotions before there were words? Pretty interesting thing to think about. But obviously, somehow they got together, big conference, and decided that, let's, talk about different emotions and give names to them so that we can communicate. Before they had names for it, did they have love? Yes. Clear. You have questions on this side?
Yeah, I was wondering, for the second level of subtlety, it was talking about the kind of simultaneous arising of the basis and the imputation.
Right.
And then, if I'm understanding the third one correctly, I just wanted to clarify.
Okay, so the second level, when we understand it correctly, you have the basis and what's imputed on it arising simultaneously, so being known simultaneously. You can only know them together. And the misconception is that when you know them together, there's something on the side of the basis that establishes it as what you're labeling on it.
So, and that would logically, that refutation of anything existing on the side of the basis would also then logically refute the concept also, or the imputation?
No, that when you refute that there's something, I can only see you by seeing the body, and you are imputed on the body. What's your name, by the way?
Karen.
Karen. So I can only see Karen imputed on the body. Is there something on the side of the body, a label, maybe sewn on the back of your shirt, that says Karen? And by the power of the fact that there is something on the side of the body that has a stamp on it, that's Karen, that makes you Karen.
Mm.
I can only see you when I see your body.
Yeah.
But what I'm refuting, not refuting that you are labeled Karen. Somebody gave you a name. But there's no Karen stamped on the side of your body that you came with that. And, by that power of that makes you Karen. Or, just when I read it, it makes you Karen. If I didn't read it, well, by itself it can't do anything. So the two views. Are you Karen to your dog? Dog would have to know you as Karen. So, like that. Mental labeling. It is a very profound and not such a simple concept. Anyway, think about it a little bit further. I mean, all of this is very clear and easy to understand when you think of qualities. Good or bad. Is there something on the side of the object that makes it good or bad? No. This is. The dog is snoring. Is there something on the side of that sound that by its own power makes it funny? No. Some people find it funny, so they label it as funny and experience it as funny, therefore laugh. They experience it. Other people find it as just a sound. So what? You don't perceive it through the label of that quality. From its own side, is it funny? No, of course not. It's just a sound. Yeah.
Well, it's obviously developed the social norms.
Pardon? With social norms.
Social norms with regards to snoring, and that it hasn't been socialized, and that we
Right, with social norms. So this is a convention. Remember the 3 criteria for validity. Is there a convention to a certain type of being that the sound of a dog snoring is funny? Yes. Is it relative? Yes. If you were trying to go to sleep and the dog was next to you snoring loudly, you would not find it amusing. It's keeping you awake. So it also is relative to the situation.
Can you recap the convention
Pardon?
and relative?
There has to be an established convention that a group agrees in within a certain context, not contradicted by a mind that validly perceives conventional truth. To a deaf person, the dog snoring is not funny. It's not anything. It doesn't hear it. And not contradicted by a mind that validly, so people who hear it, who have that convention, will find it funny. And is it not contradicted by a mind that validly sees deepest truth? If I think that that is, inherently bad and horrible and we should kill the dog, because it snores, that obviously is false. Anybody who sees, on deepest truth would see this is absurd. Dog isn't inherently bad because it snores. But yes, there has to be a convention for a certain group in a certain context, relative. Yeah.
Does it mean that all the teachings are only conventional practical?
All the teachings are only conventional and practical? Yes, of course. Practical because they're all intended to help us to overcome suffering. That's the intention of Buddha teaching. Didn't intend it in order to, make a living and get paid. And are there conventions? Well, yes, they're words. Okay. Clear? Fine. Do you want to go on? Now we get into the refutations of these. And I have this in quite a lot of detail, and I think that we don't need all this detail. So let's see if I can somehow simplify it. So first, what we want to use in order to refute the existence of these impossible these different levels of impossible soul is to think of the relation between the soul, the self, and the aggregates, And there are only two possibilities. Either, regardless of how we formulate, of being imputed or not imputed, either they're the same thing or they're two different things. When we neither one nor many is the name of the line of reasoning. When we say one, we mean totally identical. That you have to understand. I have two names, Alex and Alexander. Alex and Alexander are not one. Alex and Alex are one. It's irrelevant that Alex and Alexander refer to the same person. That's irrelevant. One means totally, absolutely identical. One thing. Okay? If you don't understand that, then the whole argument is much too confusing.
What did you say, the soul, and the aggregates?
The self and the aggregates.
Okay.
Either they are one, they are absolutely, totally the same, one thing, or they are not the same. They're two different things, or many different things. Okay. And if they are not either of these, there's no other possibility. Therefore, there's something screwy about the whole way that you're conceiving. Something, wrong about the whole way you're conceiving of that kind of self. That self either has to be identical with the aggregates or separate from the aggregates. Okay, now, the Coarse Impossible Soul, taught by a non-Buddhist Indian system. It's not imputed on the aggregates, but it's either identical with one of them. There's usually, this is one of the schools say that, it's either the body or the mind, and because of that, there's no rebirth. They would say that the self is identical to the body or the mind. Western materialism, the Indian materialist school, the Charvakas assert this. Charvakas. Charvaka, whatever. We assert that as well. A lot of people think that. I'm just my mind, and when the mind ends, I end. No rebirth. Totally identical. Or it's separate from the aggregates, and it is the inhabitant, possessor, or controller of the aggregates, and has rebirth, and can be liberated as a separate entity independent of a body or mind. Right? So it's either only the body or the mind, totally identical with it, or separate from it and inhabiting the body or the mind, and then traveling out and could exist by itself in some transcendent realm when it's liberated. Okay, now, remember we had that deluded outlook toward a transitory network. That's throwing the net of this coarse, impossible me onto the aggregates.
Coarse, what does that mean?
Coarse means gross, not subtle.
Yeah.
Like, little big grains of sugar as opposed to powdered sugar. So that diluted outlook, throwing the net of me onto the aggregate so then it's identical with it, or mine onto the aggregates, the separate me that is living inside the aggregates and pressing the buttons. So these are the two views that you would have because of this obtainer attitude, which activates karma, throwing karma. You want to get rid of that. Now, that assertion that the coarse soul of a person is identical with one of the aggregates is the Charvaka view, which does not accept karma, rebirth, or liberation. It just asserts a static, monolithic soul that can't exist separately from the body or mind. Since the soul, now here's the logic. You know, they say that the soul is static and unaffected by anything. But if it's identical with the body or mind, then the body or mind would have to be static and not affected by anything. So it could never grow old and never get sick. So we have something a little bit similar to that when you identify with a young, healthy body. And so that's me. So, you know, when the body gets sick, that's not me. You know, me is the young, healthy body. Look in the mirror, that's not me. So that's impossible. If they're really identical, that the body, you know, that it's not affected by anything. So this rids us of the extreme outlook. Remember, we had these deluded outlooks, that our present body and minds will last forever. So there's a gross denial of gross impermanence of death, or that there's no continuity after death, that the self ends when the body ends. You know, if it is not affected by anything, it can't die. So how can you say that it ends when you die? And it could never get sick, because that means that it's changing, it's, you know, like that. So the whole thing is crazy. Yeah.
I think
self-contradictory, I should say.
like from a Western materialist point of view, you wouldn't say there was an unchanging self. You would say there was a merely imputed changing self that ends upon the termination of the...
Okay, so he's saying that the Western view is that there is a changing imputed me that continues as long as the body continues, and then that ends. However, there is also the disturbed view, which identifies oneself with a young, healthy body, and is always trying to look young. Therefore, you have a facelift. Therefore, you color your hair. Why do people color their hair when they get older? Because they have this image that they should be young. And then, of course, there are other disturbing emotions that come from that, because if their hair is dyed, then they will, you know, be attractive to somebody. So we're talking about deluded views, and even the view that the self is imputed on a changing thing but will end at the end of life. Well, that's another view. We're talking about different levels of what's impossible.
I was looking for you to put a nail in the coffin of
You are not being patient. When we are refuting A, you are complaining that we're not refuting B yet. That's called impatience. Okay. This assertion, get back to our good friends the Charvakas, it also rids us when we realize that this is ridiculous, that you can have a static soul that doesn't change, that doesn't experience the effects of its karma. It also is you're not affected at all by what happens in this life either. That also doesn't make any sense. What about the assertion that the mind and body and the self are identical in terms of being a partless monolith? Since the self is a monolith with no parts, then if you lose part of your body or lose part of your mind, and the body is identical with the self, or the mind is identical with the self, how could that work? You couldn't lose part of it because it's a monolith, it's partless. So how could it lose a part? That doesn't make any sense if it's identical. So when we refute this view of the body and mind, or the mind being identical with the self, We get rid of this throwing the net of me onto the body or mind. And we also, well, I don't know, I don't want to get into all the details of this. This is going to get too complicated. So let's just leave it at that. It can't be identical. You know, these will, when we realize that it's not identical, it will rid us of various types of deluded outlooks. These deluded outlooks about rebirth and whether, you know, how rebirth happens and will there be effect in future lives and so on. You know, there's the specific details of that. And these deluded outlooks that have to do with rebirth and so on are doctrinally based. They don't automatically arise. The dog doesn't worry about rebirth, you know, and doesn't think that there's going to be no consequences of my actions in, you know, future lives. It's not its concern. So, without going into the details of which deluded outlooks each of these refutations gets rid of, we'll just go on. Okay, so it can't be that there's a static, unchanging self with no parts that is identical with a body and mind, because they're changing from moment to moment, and they're affected by what happens, and they have parts. You lose your memory. There's a part. So it's self-contradictory. Then the other view is if the self were separate and totally different from the aggregates and just inhabited them, possessed them and controlled them, but it could be liberated and exist separately, then the contradiction follows that if the self is static and unaffected, it couldn't do anything. So it couldn't control any of the attitudes of the aggregates. It couldn't possess one network of aggregates, let's say in one body, and then possess another one in another lifetime. How could it do that? How could it do anything if it can't, you know, if you do something, you're doing something. So you're not staying, you know, unchanging. You're doing something. So that doesn't make any sense to say that there is a static, monolithic self that's living inside me, living inside this body and controlling it. So that doesn't make any sense. And it couldn't be monolithic and partless if sometimes we're multitasking, doing more than one thing at the same time. And it has parts, doesn't it? Yes?
That would be like I don't know if it's the Indian or like the Hindu, that the soul travels to another body, right?
Right, we're talking about the non-Buddhist Indian systems. And the non-Buddhist Indian systems at the time of the schools and so on, where all of this is developed, were not yet called Hindu. And some of them would not be considered Hindu anyway, because we also have the Jains in here as well. Hindu is a later term. So it's, you know, if you want to use a very general word, we're talking about, well, as I say, it's not just Hindu, because it's also Jain. Self can't be, you know, that type of static, monolithic self can't be identical with the body or mind, and it can't be separate either. It's living inside the body or mind, because if it were, then it couldn't do anything. Couldn't control, you know, it says that it's static, but it's controlling the body. Well, controlling the body means that it changes. It's doing something, so that doesn't make any sense. And it can't be partless, because we multitask. We see and hear at the same time. We do many different things at the same time. So it's not, it doesn't make sense for the self to inhabit it and make use of it. So that's getting rid of some other type of deluded outlook. So we have, you know, why would you want to, you know, inhabit this type of body, and so on, or mind? In any case, what we're left with at the end of this refutation is that impossible self, with the characteristics that they are saying that they have, that it is static and monolithic, and either it's identical with the body or mind, or can be separate and can be liberated and exists without a body or mind and just lives inside a body or mind, that neither of those positions make any sense. They're both self-contradictory. Therefore, there's only those two possibilities. That either that impossible self is same as the aggregates, or it's totally different. And if it's neither of the two, then there's no such thing. That's how you refute it. And then you focus on no such thing as that type of self which is experiencing true suffering, which is causing more suffering, in terms of the true cause of suffering, of thirsting and so on, which can be liberated and exists by itself if it gets the understanding of how it exists. So the voidness of that type of self in relation to the Four Noble Truths. That's how you meditate on it. Yeah.
I think I'm following your explanation of why the self can't be the same as one of the aggregates, but I'm not completely following the logic or the way of refuting that the self is not separate from the aggregates.
If the self, just saying, could we explain a little bit more clearly how the self cannot be a static self that is unaffected by anything?
Okay.
It's unaffected, which means that it can't affect anything either, because then it changes. Now I ate, I didn't eat and now I ate. There's a change. I've used the body to eat. So how could a self that can't do anything? A self that can't change do anything? So this whole assertion that that kind of self lives inside the body and controls it and possesses it and inhabits it doesn't make any sense. If there was such a thing, it couldn't do anything. And it certainly couldn't do more than one thing at a time, because it is monolithic. So it can't have parts. One part, seeing, and the other part listening at the same time, and walking at the same time, and text messaging at the same time. Yeah.
With regards to the monolithic aspect of the self, can you comment on how other people's memory of you and is actually compounding also yourself?
How other people's memory compounds that? Absolutely. This is a very crucial point that, it gets on a deeper level. That, what establishes that I exist is that I have a Facebook page, and what establishes, if you don't have a Facebook page, you don't exist. And so you're identical with the Facebook page, and what establishes your identity is your profile on the Facebook page, and that by its own power, establishes you as a person. And then everybody relates to you in terms of if that profile corresponded to a real person, which it doesn't. So it's very interesting that then people's memory, as you say, the way relating to you is always on the basis of there are these defining characteristics. It's your profile right there on your Facebook page. Doesn't change. And that's who you are. That's what makes you, you. And of course, it's just, you put it there. Mentally labeled. You typed it in. And then you're stuck with that, which is horrible. And then other people believe that that's you. That's even worse. So it's a great example for the whole craziness of samsara. Really makes it much more, what should we say? Difficult, because everybody is into it. But I think a more obvious example of how this is complete nonsense.
You
Yeah.
have a Facebook page.
Do I have a Facebook page? No way. No way. My website has a Facebook page, as if the website were a person. It has a website page that just has an automatic feed onto it of the new articles. That's all. I certainly don't, entertain questions on it or anything like that. Or post pictures of me being here.
We'll do that.
How do you develop, well, how do you have a self that has labels, like a professional, you're a doctor, or you're a mom, a dad? Now, you have a label from your children, and you have a label from your associates or your colleagues or your...
Mm-hmm. Well, these are convention. How do we establish? We are a mother, we are a daughter, we are a friend, we are an employee. All these things are labeled in terms of, different relationships, and we're all of them. But you are not a... we get this disturbing emotion, this confusion when you make your child into your friend and into your equal, or you try to make your child into your mother, these sort of things. Then you get confused about these labels and these roles. There are conventional roles. We're not denying that there are conventional roles, but it's not, solidly established, and you're that and nothing else. And then you're that to absolutely everybody. But we tend to confuse these roles, and then I become the mother of my dog as well, and these sort of things. I expect my child to now take care of me as if my child were my mother. Or I confide in my 10-year-old child after I've had a divorce, because now that 10-year-old child is my best friend and becomes my substitute, marriage partner. Then you get real problems. Anyway, that is the refutation and the way that we meditate on the, the voidness of, or lack is the specific word. No such thing as this impossible, this coarse impossible me. Okay? So let's end here for lunch, and then we'll continue.